Who were the people that you look up to when you were young? I remember the people that I idolized when I was 7 years old, and they're very different than the people that I look up to today. And so when I was 7, this is the person that I thought was the coolest person in the world. Lou Ferrigno, the original Hulk. I just wanted to be like him. Kids, just indulge me for a second. Let me tell you a bad dad joke. Does anyone know a good veterinarian? Because these puppies are sick. Just use that. Trust me, you will win friends and influence people. But I don't know about you, but think back on when you were younger. Who are the people that you looked up to? Maybe it's Buck Taylor from Gunsmoke. Maybe it's Sue Ellen from Dallas. Maybe it's MacGyver. I loved MacGyver so much. He was like my idol. He could do so many things with a piece of bubble gum and a paper clip. And I thought these actors were the most important people in the world. I thought they uniquely worked their way to the top of a social hierarchy in Hollywood. And I thought they fought their way and did something that no one else has to do. And then I grew up and I realized that this is actually a reality that all of us face. All of us, in some way, shape, or form, no matter the society that you're in or the relational networks that you're in, all of us are trying to climb a social ladder. You don't just have to be a Hollywood star for that. There's a reason why sibling rivalries are actually a thing. Even within the family system, right? A few siblings and 2 parents. Sisters argue with each other. Who's the prettiest? Who's married the most successful guy? Who's the most successful? All that stuff. Guys, who's the strongest? Who's the fastest? Who is on varsity? Who's on JV? Sibling rivalries are a thing because all of us are trying to work our way to the top of a hierarchy. And this is just society in general. All of us agree on certain values that exist out in the world. Let's just call that the good life. We create shared definitions of what the good life is about, and then we compete with each other about who is going to do it best. And these value systems change over time. So my wife volunteers with student ministry on Sundays at Sunday Reset, and she mentors a group of girls, and we went out to lunch with a group of them, and they're talking and they're giggling and they're doing what they do. But eventually they started to talk about boys, right, as girls do sometimes. And there was this phrase that came up, and I was perplexed by it because I had never heard it before. But they kept on talking about how they want to find a high-value man. And does anyone know what this phrase means? I had to actually ask them the question, what do you mean by a high-value man? And basically it meant 2 things. It means they want to find a guy who's fit and a guy who makes money. And so there it is when you're in your 20s. That's, as you're looking to pair up, that's what you're being judged on. That's what you're trying to work the ladder towards, being fit and having money so that you can have a partner. As you get older, it's funny how those value systems change, but the game is still the same. Who of us here, as a married person, has ever been up at, let's say, 10:30 p.m. or 11 p.m., and you are the one unloading and loading the dishwasher for the 5th night in a row? And as you're there, you're just grumbling to yourself, I'm the only one who does work around here. I'm the only one holding this house together. I'm the only one who cleans. I'm the only one who does blank, whatever it is. What are you doing in that moment? You've created this shared idea between you and your spouse about what the good life is, and then you're complaining because you feel like you are higher on that ladder than he or she is. The reality is all of us do this. I don't care if it's your workplace, if it's your home, if it's your school. And there's a problem with creating social hierarchies like this, is that one of the biggest problems is that they all come with hierarchy. The reason this is important for us is because in our conversation today, I hope we realize that the Bible existed in a world that's very much like our world. Human beings have always been constructing social hierarchies so that they can identify who's a success and who isn't a success. In the Roman world, let's say 2,000 years ago, there was this thing called the cursus honorum. So this is one of the problems when you have so I have a doctorate in history. So this is one of the problems when you have a doctor speaking to you. So I'm going to give you a bunch of ancient texts. But like in the Roman world, there was this thing called the cursus honorum, the course of honor. And you could judge people by where they were at on that journey of getting social honor. And there were certain thresholds that you had to cross and certain characteristics that you had to have. And oftentimes I hear this phrase being said, oh, like, we live in such modern times. We live in the 21st century. Can you believe this is still happening today? And part of me thinks, like, if you actually read history, you would realize that we are not dissimilar from our ancient past. 2,000 years ago, we are still fighting for and talking about the same exact thing. Let me give you an example. I want to compare two people. The first of which is an ancient philosopher named Epictetus, and the second of which is a rapper named Kanye. And they both are saying the same exact thing. They're trying to get social honor for themselves. And so Epictetus will say, possess bright clothes and all other kinds of finery, and show yourself off as one who is honored by the most distinguished person. What is Epictetus trying to teach us? Like, you need to dress the right way if you're going to get approval from people and work your way up the social ladder. What does Kanye, like early Kanye, before he went crazy, what does Kanye say? I always had a passion for fashion. For those of you who are more mature in the room, that means dressed well. I always had a passion for fashion, and before I had it, I closed my eyes and imagined. Like, both of them are saying the same exact thing. You need to look a certain way, you need to act a certain way, you need to achieve a certain image, and then you will get social honor. And the problem with this is not that it's a bad thing to look good, but oftentimes there's a correlate to social honor, which is you look down your nose at the people around you because you have accomplished or you have gained more than they have. And you become envious and spiteful of the people who have accomplished more than you. Social value always comes with a hierarchy or a race to the top. There are always winners and losers. There are always haves and have-nots. Like, if you're not first, you are last. We all know. Anyway, Talladega Nights, never mind. If you're not first, you are last. We're always competing. Like, there's that one car in the parking lot, and I'm going to be the person to get it. And there's that one home in that area that I want to be, and I'm going to be the buyer who gets it. There's that one promotion at my job, and I'm going to be the person who gets that. And if I have to walk over you, if I have to cut you off at the knees, I am going to get that because that is my track up. This is the society that we live in, but it's also the society that the church lived in the first century. And the danger of this is that it ruins social relationships. Like, who here hasn't ever seen sibling rivalry turn mean and spiteful, and suddenly relationships get estranged? Who here hasn't had an office buddy where suddenly you get that promotion, and now suddenly they aren't as friendly with you as you used to be? Who here hasn't seen a friend become extraordinarily successful, and now they look down their nose at you because you haven't accomplished what they have, and they no longer want to hang out with you? As we play these social games, what ends up happening is if we do it in an unhealthy way, the relationships we have and love begin to fray. And it's here that I think the Bible speaks with tremendous wisdom about the nature of these social games that we play and the requirement that God has given us to love each other. Like, if you're new, we are continuing our sermon series in 1 Corinthians 13, which is like the great love chapter of the Bible. And today we are going to be reading verses 4 through 7. And Paul here speaks into the ancient culture with a profound word of challenge, not just for them, but I think us as well today. And so open your Bibles with me or turn on your smart devices, or you can find the verse on the screen as well. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. Love does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Think, there's always a reason why we say stuff. Anytime you read the Bible, I always want you to question, like, why is Paul, why is Peter, why is Jesus saying this now? The context that Paul was speaking to was to the ancient church in a city called Corinth, along the Aegean on the Greek peninsula. And Corinth had some status. It was known as a Roman colony. So by a lot of standards, they had made it. But the problem is they were always a second-class city. Rome was always looming over the horizon, and they could never achieve what Rome had achieved. But they wanted to, because the main virtue that they pursued was social honor. And so they scrapped, and they were aggressive. They tried to climb that social ladder harder than any other city in the ancient world. And I don't care if it's sex, if it's power, if it's money, if it's relationships, if it's business. They wanted to turn everything up to 11. And this is the culture that Paul was speaking to. And as he got to know this church, he realized that the culture had actually bled into the church. And this is how bad it was. I want you to consider for a second. Like, imagine a church in the area that was known for its own members suing each other. Like that's actually what it was known for. Like you cut me off in the parking lot and you are going to talk with my lawyer. I tell you what, I am going to sue you. Like, imagine a church with a tiered coffee system. Like, if you look the right way and act the right way and give the right way, well, come on in, ma'am. Come on in, sir. You can come over here. You can get the perfect coffee pour over. Like, we're going to give you a cappuccino with the cool little flower or the heart in it, whatever it is, what kind of art decoration you want. You're going to get all of that. But if you don't look the right way and don't talk the right way and don't give the right way, well, then you can just go over here and you can have day-old Folgers coffee. Like, this is what the church in Corinth was actually known for. In its communion meal, it would serve wine. But it had two types of wine. The really good wine that it would serve to all the important people, and then the other kind of wine that they would just serve to everyone else. There was a hierarchy that was happening. And this was the culture. Like, it wanted to be like the world. This church judged itself by Roman standards. It valued itself by the standards of Rome. It measured itself by the standards of Rome, and it wanted the best everything. It wanted the best food, only the best for me. It wanted the best entertainment, only the best for me. It wanted the best location, only the best for me. And by the way, Paul, since you're the leader, you need to be able to provide it. Like, I need the flashiest pastor who can speak better than every other pastor in the area. And if I can't get that from you, then I'll hire Apollos, I'll hire Peter, I'll hire someone else to do it for me. And by the way, Paul, I want you to speak on exactly the topics that I want you to speak on, and I never want you to make me feel uncomfortable. Oh yeah, and by the way, as you think about worship and the songs that you play, I want you to only play the songs that I want. Oh, and in terms of the people that come in, I want you to have a bouncer at the door. Like, I don't want you to keep that riffraff. I want you to keep that riffraff out. Only people that I like, that look like me, that talk like me, and earn like me are allowed in, because I never want to be uncomfortable. The church in Corinth had become a consumer-based church. I want it my way, I want it right away, and I'll fire you and hire someone else who can do it if you can't do it for me. And Paul looks at this, and I think this is so important. He doesn't just take it head on. Like, he knew that in this church, the biggest problem wasn't sin. And let me say this again. He knew in this church that the biggest problem wasn't sin. Sin is always, in my mind, a symptom of something deeper. That is a lack of vision. This church had lost vision of who Jesus is. And I think all of us know that this principle is intuitively correct. You tell me who you're looking at, you tell me what you visualize, and I will tell you what your behavior is. Vision drives behavior always. Imagine with me for a second. You had a parent or a grandparent who was in their late 80s, early 90s, and let's just say gingerly, they're not known to be like Dale Earnhardt. They're not like an amazing driver. Let's just say they're getting into a few fender benders here and there, and let's just say it begins to ramp up. They go from getting in a small little minor fender bender once a year to now suddenly every week, right? It's a cop car here, it's a fire pole there, whatever it is. Like, if you're going to solve for that problem, what you don't do is say, grandma or grandpa, like, let me take you to a parking lot and show you how to use your blinker. Let me show you how to signal left and signal right. Let me show you where the brake pedal is. No, what you do is you take them to an eye doctor and you try to figure out if they can see correctly, because chances are they probably can't. And then you get them to wear glasses, because the reality is the reason they were getting in so many accidents isn't because they don't know how to drive. It's because they didn't know how to see correctly. Paul is doing the exact same thing with the church in Corinth. He assumes that the deepest problem this church has is, are they seeing Jesus? And this can be such a vicious cycle, because when we lose sight of Jesus, what ends up happening is we become a consumeristic church that just wants our needs met. And the more we press into that, the more we lose track of Jesus. And then the more we lose track of Jesus, the more we press into ourselves and what we want, and it becomes a vicious cycle downward. And it sneaks into our hearts and our minds in ways you would never think. I remember when I first started pastoring, we hired a new worship pastor. And this guy was so cool. He had like the hair, right? He had like the look. He could play the guitar. He could sing. And I remember like one of his first Sundays in this church, he led like the most inspired worship I had ever been around. Like, hands were raised, everyone was singing. The Holy Spirit filled the building. But I remember driving home and thinking to myself, I wonder why the worship pastor was wearing sandals. Like, you shouldn't wear, this is God's house after all. We should all be in suits and ties, right? This is God's house after all. We shouldn't have open toes on stage. Like, suddenly, instead of thinking about what was preached on, what worship was like, I was thinking about what the pastor was dressed like. This idea that I somehow need my expectations met, otherwise I am going to critique the church, snuck into my heart. And this happens across the board for all of us. Like, we become more concerned with what the pastor is wearing than what the pastor is saying. Although, if Logan's ever up here with the tank top, please let me know. Like, you can find my business card in the lobby. Like, we become more concerned about the color of the carpet versus the content of our community witness. Like, we're more worried about individuals who in goodwill have left the church than the new people who are coming, who God has brought here, who need love and discipleship. Like, we're more worried about what the church used to be than what the church is and where God is taking it. And the reason we struggle with this is because we want it my way right away. We have this ideal of what the church is, and if we don't get it, we become frustrated. These are the kinds of churches that Paul found. And yet, I'm always astounded by this. We know for a fact that the first century church grew. And it didn't just grow, it exploded. Why? Because Paul solved for the vision problem that they had. He didn't take sin head on. He knew that sin was a symptom of something else. They had lost focus on Jesus. In a world that says, do you boast and post on social media about all of your great successes, all of your great vacations. And Paul says, no, that's actually not what we're called to be. That's not how we're called to exist in the world. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4, this is how we're supposed to exist. Love is patient. Love is kind. This is a counterintuitive way of being in the world, and it surprised everyone. And yet the world gathered on the very edge of the church and just pondered at how these people love each other. Love is patient, love is kind. Paul solved for the vision problem. And I don't even love that translation. Love is kind. If you look at the original Greek, it's actually more something like love is benevolent. Love pursues the good of the other with their own resources and does it in a way that's incredibly patient. Parents do this all of the time with their kids. Right? They solve for the vision problem. They see the beauty and the potential in their kids, and then they invest themselves, not over days or over months, but over years, to bring out the potential in that child. Patiently loving, patiently being benevolent towards that child in the ups and in the downs. when the child is saying thank you and when the child is not saying thank you, when the child is having a great time, when the child is throwing a temper tantrum, there's an evenness, there's a patient benevolence that happens. Because you see who the person is becoming and you're so invested in that potential. You're so invested in that person's becoming that you're able to make it through the ups and downs of life. And in my mind, this is something that we always just assume about younger kids, right? 10, 20, maybe even into your 30s. We think to ourselves, okay, they're still in development. I see their potential and I want to bring out their potential. And we forget sometimes. I think we actually underestimate the change, the character change that can happen in someone who's 40 or 50 or 60 or 70. We love to say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I think the Bible shows us a different vision of what it means to be a human being. I remember, if I can share a personal story, my dad was divorced at age 42. And I knew my dad to be a hard man. He was a carpenter. There was a right way to do things and there was a wrong way to do things. And if it was wrong, he would tell you. If you ever talk with me and you wonder, why is Pastor Dan so uptight? Right? That's exactly why I was uptight. But I watched my father after age 42 go through a divorce. And between 42 and 52, he became one of the most gentle, soft-spoken, kind men I have ever been around. In a decade, how does he make that change? He gets broken through the downs of life, and he commits himself to a church community, and there were a few men in that church who saw the potential in my dad, and they just pursued him. When he was rageful and angry, when he was down and depressed, when he was struggling with all sorts of kid issues and relational issues and house issues and financial issues, they stayed faithful to him. And in so doing, they brought my dad to a different place. Through the work of the Holy Spirit, right? Founded on the Word. They were patiently benevolent with my dad through the ups and downs of life. They solved for the vision problem, and they loved the way that no one else loved. And this is how we as a church are to see each other. Not just how we see kids, not just how we see teenagers, not just how we see young adults, but how we see each other, ages 10 to ages 100. All of us have a God-given seed of potential in us that's growing to become more like Jesus, that's growing to become more like the gospel. Do we see it in each other, and are we invested in it with each other? If you're new to this community, I want you to know, like, we are invested in you, not just because you're here today, and not just because you might be here next week, but because over the next 10 years of your life, we want to see you become more joyful and more generous and more open and more. We want to see you become the person that Jesus has designed you to be, and we're invested in that. We ask you to get invested in us. But I think there's this vision problem that we have when it comes to love, that we don't see people the way that Jesus sees people. And because of it, we give up too early when times get hard, and we don't patiently pursue someone else's good in love in the same way that 1 Corinthians 13 is telling us or challenging us to do. I remember in my own growth towards this trajectory, I remember early on in my ministry when I was still cutting my teeth as a pastor, I was actually at a church that reminds me so much of the Sussex campus. It's one of the reasons why I feel like coming to Sussex is like a homecoming for me. Like, the stage was exactly the same. The outlay was exactly the same. It was a storefront church. And I had a senior pastor at that point in time. And he would drive me crazy because he had so much wisdom and so much patience. As a young pastor, I would be walking alongside of someone and they would be blowing up the church. They'd be blowing up their families, making all the wrong decisions, and I would just get frustrated with them. Like, why can't they just see what's good and then choose what's good? And he had this phrase that I loved. He would look at me and he would say, Dan, they're still cooking. They're still cooking. It's like God gave Sean, he was my senior pastor, like this superpower of seeing the potential in people. And because he saw the potential in people that God had placed there, man, he could walk with people patiently through the ups and downs of life. And God, through his leadership and through his personality and through his preaching, just blew up that church and went from 100 people to 400 people in just a few years. But it would frustrate me because he had this ability to see the God-given potential of everyone that he had the privilege of being able to pastor. And there was one guy in particular that stands out to me. His name was Brian. Brian drove me crazy. I remember the first time I met Brian. He walked into church. Already doesn't really look, he's super disheveled, looks like he's probably on a bender of a little bit, sitting in the back corner. So I'm like, okay, eyes on him. I want to love him, but I also want to just keep track of him. And so he sits in the back, and the first thing he does is he lights up a cigarette in the church. So he lights up a cigarette, and so I'm like, okay, Dan, be patient, be gentle, love is kind, it's ever-bearing. Okay, let me walk over to him. So I sidle up to him. I'm like, hey, sir, you can't smoke in the church. And I didn't even want him to put out the cigarette. I just wanted to walk him out the doors and say, like, hey, here's the corner over here. It's out of the wind. You can finish your cigarette and then come in and worship with us. And as I'm talking with him in the sanctuary, he blows up at me. He's like, oh, what? I can't smoke in the church anymore? I'm like, nope, sir, you can never smoke in the church. Like, it was never a thing at any point in time. There's no smoking in here. But Brian drove me crazy. Again, we're a storefront church, and we realized one year that the Christmas parade goes right by us. And so we're like, well, let's engage our community. And so we come up with a ministry plan to just give out free hot chocolate to anyone who's walking by. And so at a high level, I'm trying to organize all the volunteer teams. We have 40 volunteers. We're on both sides of the street. We're trying to do all this stuff. And I'm not really paying attention to the facts on the ground as they're happening because there's other people who are serving and doing that. But as I'm trying to administrate everything, I look outside. And here's Brian. And again, Brian's 65, but he looks like he's 92. And he's a struggling alcoholic. And he's outside in the middle of winter, standing in the middle of the sidewalk. Parents have to go onto the street with their kids just to get around him. And he's got a Santa hat on. He's got a cigarette in his mouth. He's literally blowing smoke on children as they're walking by. And not only that, he's trying to pass out hot cocoa because he cares and he wants to try. But he's an alcoholic, and so he's got the shakes. And he doesn't have enough wisdom to know you should put a cap on the top. And so he's trying to hand out the hot cocoa. But he's spilling it on kids, and he's blowing smoke in their face. And then I hear him say, welcome to church. And I'm like, no, Brian, no. This is not what we want to do. This is not who we are. And then this little voice popped up in the back of my head. He's still cooking. I got to know Brian for 5 years. And in the 5 years he was at this church, I saw him go from being an angry alcoholic, and he always struggled with alcohol, to getting baptized, to worshiping with us, to giving the pastor compliments. And I was there when he passed away from liver failure. And I know to this day that I will meet Brian in heaven because I had a senior pastor that had a love that was directed towards a vision of who the person was. He's still cooking. I think the challenge for us as we think about our own capacity to love is, do we see people with those same eyes? How can we be more like that church? The church in Corinth, despite all of its problems, it grew, not just in size, but in love, because Paul was able to focus them on Jesus. How can we as a church take that same spiritual journey? And here I think all of us have a challenge, which is we cannot give what we do not have. Paul says something amazing as he's concluding this section. He has this refrain, panta, or always, always, always. And I've been pondering what this is. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 7 says this: love always bears burdens, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And I was wondering, what is the inspiration for this? And I thought my way through all the Old Testament, all the verses he could be quoting, and he's not quoting anything. He's not referring to any stories. What is his inspiration here? And then I realized, in the power of the Holy Spirit, Paul was talking about who he saw Jesus to be. Namely, when you see Jesus, you see love. And love always does some things because Jesus always does things. And Paul gave what he had. He had this same Jesus inside of him, and he pointed people towards that. And I think this is a word of challenge for us. Have we experienced that same kind of Jesus? Jesus always bears burdens. What are the burdens that you're carrying today? Maybe it's the burdens of an estranged relationship or someone who was close to you who passed away. Maybe it's the burden of depression or social anxiety. Maybe it's the burden of never feeling like you actually fit in. Like maybe it's the burden of financial troubles, or maybe it's the burden of a word you said or a mistake you made years ago that you can't forgive yourself for. What we know for sure is that all of us carry the burden of sin, and on the cross, Jesus died for it so that he could carry it as opposed to us carrying it. And that means he's going to carry all of our other burdens. He is with us, bearing it for us, and he's given us the community of faith. Galatians 6:1, bear each other's burdens, that in so doing we might fulfill the law of Christ. We bear each other's burdens. Are you invested in this community, helping other people carry their burdens? Are you sharing with other people so that they might help you carry your burdens? Paul experienced this Jesus, that he can always trust, that he can always hope in, that he knows is always going to persevere for him. And this has been something I've been really wrestling through because I've gone through ups and downs in my life. Every pastor does. You go through highs where you feel it and it's wonderful, and you also go through lows at times where you don't feel it. And out of discipline and obedience, you continue to follow Jesus. And I don't think I'm alone in this. I think all of us go through times where we are spiritually low, and maybe not even just spiritually low. We define ourselves by what we used to be. We used to be passionate about Jesus. We used to raise our hands in worship. We used to pray. We used to feel it, but we have lost that loving feeling. And like maybe, just maybe, right now as you sit here, you're actually worried about that day when you meet Jesus face to face because you are worried that he is going to be disappointed with the state of your faith. Here is the most beautiful thing about faith. Jesus always perseveres for us, meaning our faith is not completely our own. When we hang on to Jesus in faith, and if you don't, you should. I would love to talk with you after service. But when we hang on to Jesus with faith, guess what? He hangs on 10 times harder. And he will not let go of you. Why? Because he perseveres for you. That's why we can hope in him. That's why we can trust in him. That's why we can allow him to carry our burdens for us. And we as a community are called to encounter that Jesus and then to give it away. I'm going to invite the worship team up to finish our time in worship with song. But as we conclude, I want to challenge us with what the Sussex Hamilton area needs, with what Lannon needs. Think of your next door neighbor. Think of the loneliness that they might be going through. Think of the kids in your neighborhood. Think of what they need. Think of people in this church and what they need. Paul gives us this dramatic and beautiful challenge about what love looks like. Are you seeing people as obstacles just that are in your way? People you have to step over to climb the social ladder? Or are you seeing them as human beings made in the image of God with a redemptive seed planted in them that you get to see, to value, and to patiently bring out of them? The church in Corinth, despite all their faults, did this. And they grew in love and in discipleship, and they began to look more like Jesus. And the church grew because of it. I think we as a church have the same kind of challenge. We get to walk with people through the ups and downs of life. We get to love strong because Jesus is strong, and we get to get after it together because that's where Jesus is going. Let's worship.